Hello everybody, and welcome to Level Up Railways. I'm Michael, and today I'll be discussing how I built my first model train layout. Now, when I started building it, I did not think I would be making a YouTube channel, so the number of photos and videos I have of the build process are quite limited. However, I hope this video inspires some people to dive into the hobby, and if you're a veteran hobbyist, feel free to leave some recommendations down below. I'd love to hear them. Anyway, let's get started. The first thing I needed to do before I even started building was to figure out what my requirements are for this layout. The biggest problem is that it must fit into my California apartment, so the layout will need to be small and easy to move around. A 2-foot by 4-foot layout could be made on a single board and will fit well on a small folding table I have. The next thing I needed to figure out was what scale I wanted to model. Since this is my first layout, I was starting with nothing. So this means no worries about compatibility. I could pick from any scale. Okay, maybe not any scale. Good luck fitting G scale on a 2x4 board. I don't even think HO scale would fit. I could make the most out of the space available and go with Z scale, but I knew I wanted to use a commonly available scale to maximize what I can do on the layout. I also wanted something I could realistically work on with my fat fingers. N scale seems like the best choice for me. Now I needed to figure out what track I wanted to use. Tracks with a plastic roadbed, like Bachmann Easy Track and Kato Unitrack, felt too much like a toy track to me, and I wanted to make a layout with some realistic looking scenery. Don't get me wrong though, they're great for setting up track on the fly. I have straight sections of Bachmann Easy Track for my DCC programming track, and I have a loop of Kato Unitrack to run into trains. Now what caught my eye was Pico Electrofrog points. In my opinion, the metal frogs add a lot to the appearance of the track, and the more reliable electrical contact is a nice plus. So now I just need to pick between Code 80 or Code 55. And since Code 55 is supposed to be closer to actual scale, sorry fat fingers, we're going with fine scale. So now that I know what I'm working with, it's time to design the layout. To help me out, I used AnyRail. It's a design tool for your computer with a library of many popular tracks, so you can be sure everything will fit right. Look, there's Pico Code 55 right there. After looking at other small layouts for ideas, I ultimately came up with this design. The idea is that the elevated part of the layout creates two distinctive regions, as well as adding the opportunity to run a second, be it much smaller, train up top. Finally, it's time to build. I started with 2x4 particle board, then cut 2 sheets of 1-inch polystyrene foam board insulation to the same size. I stacked them up and used liquid nails between each sheet to create the bottom of the layout. Next, I cut strips of 3/16 inch cork board sheets to use as roadbed. 3/16 may have been too thick though. Next time I'll try 1/8 inch, but it's not awful. I pinned the strips down and secured them with some Elmer's glue. Then I did the same with the tracks. Now I just had to drill some small holes, solder in some wires, and test out the electronics. Speaking of which, I decided to go the extra DIY mile and build a DCC++ setup. All it needs is an Arduino board and a motor shield. Then I can use JMRI on my laptop to control the trains. Throw in a dual frog juicer to prevent shorts at the crossing, and we are off to the races. Back to the build. I made the top section in a similar fashion to the base, except I had to carve out the walls of the tunnel and cut the sheets to a natural looking shape. I also kept the whole top section assembly separate and not glued down, so I can easily work on the inside of the tunnel later. I then carved out the path for the road. You'll notice that I started placing down some buildings to figure out the details of the layout. All of these buildings were 3D printed on my Ender 3 Pro, which was great for trying different things and easily adjusting designs before printing them. You'll notice a few buildings didn't make it to the final layout. For color, I would hit them with a spray paint base coat before adding details with acrylic paints, black wash, and pastels. Same with the bridges and tunnel portals that I added next. Now I add details to the shape of the landscape. I used a Woodland Scenics rock face mold to start the cliffs around the upper section, then applied plaster around the seams and smoothed it out. I then applied plaster on the cliffs around the road, freehanding details with a brush. I wrapped up the plastering by molding out the roads, using Woodland Scenics Road Kit to help. Time for some color. This is when I added flat coloring to the tracks by spraying them with a thin layer of matte brown. A light dusting of khaki over that adds a little bit of weathering. For the cliffs, I used some thinned out acrylic paints that I applied with a sponge. I covered it all with a gray color followed by a leopard spotting of a cream color. While you may not see it, I did the same to the inside of the tunnels. For the roads, I used a matte gray spray paint, then did a light spray of satin ivory to add texture. I then used the same ivory color to cover the sidewalks. I used acrylic paints for the lines, and to help keep them straight, I used very thin masking tape that I believe is used for automobile detailing. Later, I weathered the roads with some black wash and pastels. Finally, I used Valspar Humboldt earth to cover the ground. A sample size was enough to cover this small layout. Finally, we add some green. To create the grass, I covered the ground with Elmer's glue and sprinkled on Woodland Scenics Fine Turf. To lock it in, I used a mixture of Elmer's glue, water, and a drop of dish soap sprayed on top. Next, I added ballast to the tracks and roadbed using a similar mixture to lock it in. I also used the same ballast to make a gravel driveway for the industrial building. Then I used hot glue to add in some Woodland Scenics trees, followed by Woodland Scenics clumps to make the bushes and hide the base of the trees. The hot glue left a web of stretched out strands all over the place though, so I'll probably try something else next time. Add some weathering to blend it all together, and the layout is done. Well, done. Over time, more details can be added, like the vehicles on the road and some detail work on the main street buildings. Well, that's all for today. If you have a suggestion on how I could do a step better, or want to learn more about how I did a certain step, please leave a comment. I will be working on a new layout soon, and I can do more in-depth how-to videos. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to Level Up Railways. And until next time, I will see you in the next level. Goodbye.